Yeah. Pick it up and see if I have one.
Any comment?
Christina said she heard he said yes, but I haven't seen him. We're not gonna have quorum, so which is fine. The only thing we ever vote on is the minutes. It's the only thing we did. So it's not a big deal. We'll just vote on the next meeting. All right, well, I'm showing 12:02, so we can call this meeting of the Motor Vehicle Advisory Board to order. First thing, as always, we are streaming online, so everyone say hi to the internet. And with that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Morales.
Okay. Thanks, Ted. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I am proud to report that as of last week, I have officially visited all 92 counties within 3 months. In my first year in office, we visited all 92 counties within 6 months. Last year, we did in 3 months, and this year, again, within 3 months. Today, we are here to discuss the work of the Motor Vehicle Advisory Board. Looking back to last year, our Auto Dealer Services Division issued 433 licenses, 61 new dealers, 180 independent dealers, and 111 manufacturer home dealers. Looking ahead, we are focused on adding more transactions to the online portal, utilizing innovation as one of my pillars when I came into the Secretary of State's office, to utilize innovation to be more efficient and responsive. You know, the goal of having all transactions available by the end of 2025. And I'd like to say that I truly value your expertise and dedication as a board member. Thank you for all what you do. It is important to notice that as of today, as of this year and today, I have not missed one meeting. This is my commitment to our divisions. This is my commitment to be the Secretary of State's office. In fact, allow me to share with you today that our office has been busy, hard at work, crisscrossing the state, not only me, but also our investigators, our examiners, our investigators, making sure that we're doing the work and making sure that we're working for our fellow Hoosiers, but not only under our Auto Dealer Services Division. And I'm talking to you right now here as businessmen, as entrepreneurs. You know, I like to share with you some of the things that we're doing that perhaps it benefit your industry. One of the goals that I had when I came into office is to attract investment, economic growth. So one of the things that I've been doing is welcoming a lot of dignitaries, ambassadors, consul generals from all over the world. And I'm gonna focus here. Obviously, we have 4 auto manufacturing plants here. We have GM, we have Toyota, Subaru, Honda, but also our, independent auto dealers. One of the things that I've been doing is showing Hoosier hospitality to all of them. So I'm proud to tell you that our #1 trade investor in Indiana is Japan. We have more Japanese companies, including, obviously manufacturers here in Indiana. One of the things that we were able to do, because we welcome them into the Secretary of State's office, and when they invite me to go to their events, I show up just like I'm doing right now, showing up. So I'm proud to tell you that we're doing our part, and that is why, because we're doing our little part, and I give more credit to President Trump on what he's doing, obviously, on his efforts, but within our part, we're able to help on attracting Toyota moving here to Indiana, moving their operations from Mexico to Indiana. And I'm proud to tell you that because we're building these relationships with the country of Japan. Also, some of you know this, I just got back from India. I was in India promoting Indiana. By the way, every single trip that we make, we never use taxpayers' money. It's always privately. So I'm here to tell you that I'm always going to continue to make sure that we can promote Indiana to the world and we can attract investment. On my first year in office, I became the first Secretary of State ever to lead a delegation of county clerks to go and see how other countries run their elections. Then I went to Taiwan to promote Indiana, to attract the chip industry, the semiconductor industry into Indiana, and in return, helping our Hoosier farmers to sell their crops. I was telling folks from Asia that we have the best corn, the best soybean, and we love our bacon. And I am proud to tell you that Taiwanese people are buying our crops. It benefits Hoosier farmers. Last year, I was in Germany. I went to tour Volkswagen. You never know. We may have another, another manufacturing plant here in Indiana. And then I just got back from India doing that. This is because we have vision in the Secretary of State's office. And no, I'm not going to apologize to anybody who's saying, here and there, because I became the Secretary of State's office to work, to roll my sleeves and to get the job done. Because I am a man of vision, and we're going to continue to do that. And I know people are looking at us on the website, and I'm talking to everybody that we've been hard at work since day one, and we're going to continue to do that. And your industry is so key. And I always tell everybody that the more successful our auto dealers are, our communities will benefit to that. Because you guys are the ones who sponsor the Little League teams, sponsor the parade, sponsor a lot of community events. So my job is to help you be successful. From our division, we're not in the business of shutting anybody down. We're in the business to help you thrive. And that's what we will continue to do. So I'm proud to tell you that as long as I'm in the Secretary of State's office, I'm going to have that vision, and we're going to continue to show up in the State House between 5 and 5:30 a.m. every morning, crisscross in fact, I'm going to start my second round of visits again, crisscrossing the state. This is what I hope the media should be reporting, that for the first time, they have a Secretary of State who has a vision, who's putting Indiana on the international stage and not utilizing taxpayers' money. I hope people they can open their eyes. It is time for your industries to share others. You know that, you're entrepreneurs. You create jobs. It's all about economic growth. We just rolled out our newest initiative called In My Community, which will showcase cities and towns to the rest of the world. I think it's a good thing. Or on the other hand, I can do the easy way. I can show up in the State House at 10 a.m., leave at 3 p.m., and do the minimum. I can do that. So I would prefer for people to criticize me doing the hard work. My work ethic is unmatched, and I want the world to know that as long as I'm the Secretary of State, we're going to have vision, and we're going to drive innovation, and we're going to help your industry to be more successful. So that's my message to you today. Reach out to us. Our office is here for you. We're here for you. So let's continue to create economic growth for our fellow Hoosiers. Again, I have not missed a meeting. I'm here showing up to work, crisscrossing all 92 counties. We're going to continue to do that. So my team is visiting with you as well. I have the best, the most qualified, competent people around me, and I am proud to say that. So thank you for all you do as a board member. Thank you for showing up here today. I'm relying on you. You have that expertise, that knowledge, and we need that as a board member. Caio, thank you, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Secretary. So we're down a couple people today, obviously, lots of folks on spring break. So we don't actually have a quorum. So we're going to set aside the voting on last meeting's minutes for now. We'll defer it to the next meeting, but if anyone has any questions or anything to discuss about last meeting's minutes, we can still do that. Any issues, any questions, concerns about the last meeting's minutes? Perfect, then we'll move on. In terms of office updates, just a couple things from me. Last meeting, we referenced, we were rolling out, so transitioning our IT infrastructure from an IoT controlled on-premises server-based system to a AWS, Amazon cloud-based system, I suppose, for lack of a better term. I am not a tech guy. But my understanding is, and the effect has been that we've actually been able to do some releases since our last meeting, 2 of them, in fact, on a 3-week cadence, which is very exciting for us. And it seems like some of the promises that were made early on when we changed IT vendors are coming to fruition, which we're very excited about. So far, we've got a very long backlog of sort of back-end issues to resolve, but we've actually started making progress on more dealer portal functions. So change of ownership, change of address, change of location, things like that. Stuff that, for whatever reason, in 2025 is still can only be done on a paper form. We're rolling out to online transactions. Hopefully by the end of this year, we've set a target of getting all of our transactions to an online option, with the hope that by the end of 2026, we can have them just be online, similar to how we do applications now. A couple of years ago, we transitioned to online only applications, and that's gone extremely well, both for us from a processing perspective and from the dealer side, I think, working through that. So in that vein, if you guys have anything, any transactions or any interaction you have with us that you'd like to see changed, added, improved, just shoot us an email or we can talk about it here. We'll take notes. Can't promise it'll be anytime soon, but we can certainly start, adding it to our backlog and things now that things are actually moving, get done in due course.
I gotta say that our renewal was seamless this year.
Excellent.
No issues whatsoever.
Good. And that's one of the things we're really shooting for is we would just want to be, we try to be upfront with when renewals are coming up and shoot people plenty of reminders. I think we do.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, well, we do. I think we've gone, and in fact, I think we're changing it. I think currently we do 90-37. I think we're actually going to change it to 30-14-7. So that really, as we get closer to that deadline, folks know that it's coming up. And I think that's helped in terms of more, we have fewer suspensions, I think, generally speaking, from failures to renew. And also moving the insurance and bond renewals online has helped processing speed from the clerk side without having to deal with it. That's great. I'm really glad to hear that. That's something we spent a lot of time working on and rolling out, so it's as easy as possible for folks to use. So great to hear that feedback. So like I said, if whether you have anything now or in the future, just shoot us a message, myself or Sean, and we're happy to talk more about potential functionality. Just in terms of sort of summarizing 2024, from an enforcement perspective, I know it's not everyone's favorite topic, but we ended up with about 1,250 complaints total received, which is, the most of all time. Which, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It means folks are learning that we're out there. They're learning that we're a resource for them and can help consumers when things arise. Obviously, not all of them have merit. We take any complaint and then weed out the ones that, oh, my car stopped working after I bought it 6 years ago. Okay, well, it's not a dealer issue. That's a you issue. And once again, in terms of the most violations we see, title delivery is number 1 in terms of percentage of total enforcement actions taken. The second being incomplete records. So just there's documents missing from a deal jacket. So again, I think we've seen year-over-year improvement in terms of the number of different dealers that we're having to take action against. I think there's, on the bell curve of enforcement actions, it's the worst actors that tend to, push the statistics up higher. I think the stat was that we gave before the assembly, and maybe Keegan knows off his head, but the stat we gave is that of all the money we find, I think if you take out the top 10% of those dealers, the worst offenders, the mean fine for a dealer over the course of a year is $100, or the median fine, which says that by and large, our enforcement actions are very limited, strictly to low dollar fines, typically for title delivery and not anything too serious. And it's really those bad actors that sort of drag the average up And when you dive into the data, you see that by and large, our industry folks are in line with the law and doing a great job serving their customers. And with that, I will turn it over to Keegan to talk about how our legislative session's going.
Yes, our agency bill this year was House Bill 1382. It has passed the House and the Senate. It is waiting for a concurrence vote in the House at this point. So it's through the process. It has a few sections. It has some language on manufactured home community ownership. Just clean up language around there. The division reached consensus with the Manufactured Home Association. Has language about a dealer manager not being required on site. It has language regarding a zoning affidavit exemption for out-of-state manufacturers and distributors. It has some dealer training cleanup language related to our training that we passed last year for independent dealers. There was some cleanup around there to make sure that if you're a current dealer and we're in the industry, that's not required to be taken, doesn't need to be taken if you open a new location as well. There's language about permanent bars and prohibit people who are permanently barred from obtaining a dealer license from acting as a salesperson, agent, or contractor for another dealer, and language concerning license transfers. The original version of the bill, we tried to, I think we discussed it in our last meeting, but we tried to be in the conversation around the towing industry, specifically around consumer towing. There wasn't appetite for that this year. They're focusing more on commercial towing. We'll continue those conversations because we think the consumer towing is what we see a lot of the times coming to our office, and not really the commercial semi trucks. So that's not what we're focusing on. So we'll continue those conversations and sort of get a handle on that industry as well over the next year. So
We made headway on the commercial and both individual towing too, just because some of the language that was written, I think there was progress there.
there was a lot of.
I was really surprised hearing the commercial guys testify. Just you got a freight truck on the side of the road. They can be held hostage to a certain degree.
We had a lot of meetings with the Indiana Wrecker and Towing Association. And there was a good dialogue. They're willing to come to the table and talk about these issues because it's the same as the dealer industry. They know there are bad actors in their industry as well, and they want to weed out those bad actors as much as possible because it gives the industry a bad name. So.
And who sort of leads the charge on that? There's not a towing industry, so it's just individuals, or is there a towing association?
The Indiana Wrecker and Towing Association. Yep.
I'd have to
Towing and Wrecker Association.
compliment all on your side and everybody on our side too, the progress that we made there. It seems that there is some help that's been coming to hold them somewhat accountable. So hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed and see if we can cross the finish line as it presents itself. So thank you for what you've done, and at least for bringing it to their attention.
And during I will say, something that came up during the Senate appropriations hearing, there were some questions regarding the office's enforcement actions and the increases in those enforcement actions our office is taking. Our office has not been hearing anything from the industry that we're taking too many enforcement actions or enforcement actions are too high. We're always willing to work with dealers when we send out enforcement action, take more training. We can lower that fine. So if there's anything you're hearing from other dealers about our enforcement actions, we'd love to get feedback on that to make sure we're aligned with the industry.
I think there can be conversation on that, and I might pass that idea that maybe after session ends, that the new car people and the used car people and the secretary, we all get together and try and figure out sort of where a happy median is. It seems like because we still have the issue of delivery of title that are sometimes way outside the boundaries of the dealers themselves and it gets worse and worse because there's more and more cars being transported across state lines. It's harder to get something out of New York or the West Coast or wherever that I think that it can create somewhat of a burdensome situation to where it shouldn't necessarily have that happen. And I can bring up certain situations. I'm curious of the 1,250 complaints. how many of those were related to 31-day tags? And I guess you'd have to call those a complaint, correct?
I have that number. It was actually out of the 1,253, 799 were,
So you had, out of the 1,200, you had 800 approximately that were generated because of, and then the balance were of others. It'd be interesting to see what those were. And I'm curious of the 800, and we can talk about this, how many were through fraudulent activity or just delay of title delivery?
Mhm.
And I think that's something that could be discussed as we go forward. And just understand that sometimes it does create a burden on the consumer, which we don't want to do. And of course, you don't want to persecute the big retailers. We know who they are, the guys that sell 800, 1,000 cars a month. Sometimes it's tough to deliver titles all the time in a timely fashion. And the last thing what they want to have happen is see their name on the Secretary of State's portal as a violator, particularly if it's been resolved. So, and quite true that we've had some pushback from consumers who say, I don't want to go on and file a complaint against you because you haven't done anything. You know, it's somebody else's fault. Somebody was trying to apply for citizenship and they were afraid to have their name online, not knowing what the deal was. So there's some gray area there. And I think maybe as we go forward, that can be discussed with Marty and the new car people and us and try and find a happy medium. The key there is make sure everybody knows that if they keep their records in place and do what they're supposed to do, that there is some absolution to a certain degree, but I'm glad to hear that only 450 complaints in a year. Maybe that's lower than what, you know, it just makes sure everybody knows that they can't issue a second 31-day tag. And so appreciate the cooperation. I'm sure you'd be open to a discussion after session's open to where we can try and come to some happy medium. And as I said, the alternative would be not the best alternative, but extending the tag from 30 days to 45 to even go down 60 or 90. We know what kind of peril that's going to add to it. So thanks for all you have done, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to mention that. Because we do obviously hear some things about it.
so I have.
I do want to just thank Deacon for his work this session. It's been trying at times, to say the least, as it always is. But I think he's done a really good job, you know, helping our bill get through, and I think it's going to benefit our constituency in terms of making things easier for them in the long run. So, and you know, for us too. Just a real quick final update on our, speaking of enforcement actions, on our fines and civil penalties rule. We've been discussing this with you guys throughout the last year. And getting through the rulemaking process. We had if you recall, our public hearing on it in December. In our public comment period, we didn't get any public comments. It was signed by the Attorney General and the Governor's office in January. It'll be effective finally April 19th of this year. So just as a refresher, that rule is just putting into administrative code what has been the division's policy since at least 2017 in terms of the fine structure. We also added in, we formalized the notice of violation process whereby we'll waive the fine for a dealer if they haven't had a violation within a year prior and it's a single issue. Obviously, if they haven't had a fine, but you know they've had a whole bunch of record keeping issues, we're not necessarily bound to that. But for those single issues, I think for it's similar to what you're talking about, those will get waived and that clock will reset after a year. So it's a good rule. I think it came out in a good place. And I think it's going to provide a lot of the clarity that the General Assembly was seeking to folks that are potentially subject to those enforcement actions. And finally, obviously, we've had a lot of discussion in this body over the last, 2.5 years since I've been here, related to what to do when plates on demand goes down. Obviously, that causes a lot of consternation for all parties involved. Obviously, my inbox knows as soon as POD goes down, I'm getting messages asking about it. And of course, it's always either on Friday at 5 or Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. You know, obviously, we take steps to alleviate that and prevent that from happening as much as humanly possible. I think the downtime over the last year was something like 4.5 hours total over the last 365 days, which is pretty good, I would say. But given that it does go down and it is annoying for the parties involved, we've tried to come up with a policy that would essentially, in short, permit dealers to use their dealer plates and provide dealer plates to a customer in limited circumstances when we, as the division, declare a total POD outage. So if you're having login trouble, but everyone else is fine, you wouldn't be allowed to do this. It's when we know there's a systemic issue going on and people can't log in, and we're, obviously working diligently on resolving it permanently, but in the meantime, providing some relief to the folks that are in the dealers trying to purchase vehicles and get their paper tag and get out the door. So we only sent it last night, so obviously you probably haven't had a lot of time to digest it. That's the short version. The long version is essentially there's going to be some record keeping requirements. In the event there is a total POD outage, we'll send out a communication and post on our website and put it on the portal if you can get access to the portal, that there is an outage. The dealer will be allowed to provide a dealer plate to a buyer with some minimal record keeping requirements, i.e. what's the plate number you're giving them, the date on which you're providing it. And then once POD is back up, the customer then has to come back in, return the dealer plate. You can issue them a regular temp tag on that date. So it is a post-dated temp tag. They'll get those extra days, and we're just willing to live with that. And that way the dealers are keeping track of their dealer plate inventory. There's not a bunch of folks out there with dealer plates driving around. And then, everything that goes along with that. So obviously it's just a first pass. We can talk about it here today, or if we want to wait until the next meeting to sort of, obviously we don't have a quorum, which we don't necessarily need, but more people in the room talking about it, I think is probably helpful. But if you guys have any initial feedback, happy to sort of open the floor and have that discussion.
What's the downside?
Well, the division, I think, generally is extremely hesitant to allow dealer plates to be used in any situation where they're not typically allowed to be used. Obviously not anyone in this room, but with some of our constituency, you give them an inch, all of a sudden many miles have gone by. So we tried to make it as narrowly tailored as possible. The entire thing hinges on us coming in and announcing to everyone, hey, this policy is now in effect. POD is down for reasons that we haven't quite figured out. You can do this for the next until we tell you otherwise. So the downside is for us, well, there's two things, right? One is we're giving out dealer plates in positions that they normally can't be. Two, there is some risk on the dealer side where they're going to have to get those dealer plates back from the consumers at some point. Now, obviously, they know where they live. There's safeguards in place on that side, and it's no real other risk than there might otherwise be. But if you sell a guy a car, you give him a dealer plate, he goes out, commits a crime, all of a sudden the cops are like, hey, this guy's dealer plate was on this car, then just
out of state, but
an out of state is going to be the real risk, right? Like how you're going to ask that guy to come back in the car, come back within 7 days of POD coming back up. It's not a perfect system, and I don't know that there is a perfect system that would possibly exist, but that's why we wanted to have this conversation with you guys.
What always does seem to happen, just at that one time,
Yep.
that we needed.
Yep.
So I appreciate your flexibility and common sense approach to this, because it is frustrating.
Yeah.
Although, what did you say, 4.5 hours?
Yeah.
So
It always feels like a lot longer when you're in the middle.
it does seem like long.
It always feels a lot longer when you're in it, for sure. Especially because, everyone's calling me and I'm like, look, the RIT guys know they're working on it diligently, trust me. But again, not a tech guy, so I can't provide a lot of detail as to what's going on. But
Have they ever looked into, like, when we go to order our paper or the tags, of having where you can every month or 3 months, put in where you print off 3 blank ones? They expire,
Yeah.
but every time you regenerate, having them there in the desk to where you're not letting your metal tag go, but they're not sitting there for a year or two just to hand them out. It's so easy to go on and order plates. I wouldn't know why you couldn't order your emergency 3 or 5.
yeah. No, it's a good thought. It's not something that we had considered. That would be something that we probably have to build into the system.
Right.
But generally, on its face, I think that makes sense. I think that's certainly something we can consider as we move forward and then look at alongside or to replace this potential policy going forward.
I think with a smaller dealer may only have 2 or 3 plates.
Yeah.
You can't put him out of business. 'Cause And I know we've always tried to avoid printing extra plates just to have them in a drawer, because next thing you know, what happened to kind of like car wash.
Well, I just figured you guys would have,
disappear.
you'd have a record if I ordered my extra 5 every time I ordered my
Yeah.
50 or 100.
Yeah.
Where'd they go, or they do expire, you know?
Yeah, and that's, and to your point, I mean, that's kind of one of our biggest issues is always inventory control, right? It's controlling the interim tags that are out there, controlling the dealer plates that are out there, knowing where they are, you know, who's using them, things like that. And that's been one of the things that we've tried to work on. And I think, you know, you mentioned, and as much as I generally don't like the phrase common sense, I think this is a common sense, you know, sort
I
of.
see that as a compliment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's,
I think you have to use it.
and I think it does make sense. And to your point, Fritz, you know, there are gonna be dealers that don't have dealer plates potentially to use, and that is definitely a shortcoming that we thought about when we were discussing this potential path forward. And I think, you know, I think there are solutions to that. I think we can take that sort of thing into consideration when we're determining how many dealer plates the dealer is eligible for. Obviously, to just have extra dealer plates that they're paying for every year, they don't necessarily need to use, probably isn't ideal. But again, you know, if we're in a situation where POD is down for an extended period of time and folks, and it's truly dire, I mean, I think at that point we start looking at, you know, emergency measures beyond even this, you know, and it's tough for us to foresee that sort of thing potentially happening because it just hasn't happened before. And with the AWS, I mean, you know, now that our systems are in the cloud, if AWS goes down, and I think we even saw a situation happen last year where AWS went down and 60% of the internet runs on AWS now. So yeah, you couldn't get into POD, but you also couldn't get on anyone's website. Like the entire internet was down. And as important as POD is to us and to you guys, the people can't access their bank accounts anyway, right? Like if AWS goes down, we're all kind of screwed. So, you know, it's important to keep that context. And I do think as we move forward with AWS, outages will continue to decrease and but we are closely monitoring it. So, you know, I think maybe, I don't know the best way to go about this, but if you guys are okay with this, maybe we'll sit on it for one more meeting and then, you know, next time we can discuss it with a larger group. Hopefully folks can come. And in the meantime, if we have a POD outage, we'll just.
I think it's good. I'll check with our folks. When I
Absolutely.
get back and see, you know, typically I get the phone call when there's an issue, when there's a problem, so.
Yep. Yeah, that'd be great. Talk to your folks that are in the office and see what they think about it.
And again, as I mentioned earlier, maybe in the language, you determine if the license branch can issue a temporary tag.
Yeah.
If the license branch is open.
Yeah, that's a good point. And
I mean, obviously, it's not gonna be 100% cure, but it's a sure possibility. If, again, if you put it in the language where is an exception to.
Yep.
Going to a licensed branch, it might be.
yeah, and I think, and I need to double check on this, but I think BMV's bill this session has some language related to temp tags. And sort of giving them more flexibility in situations where they can issue them. So we'll have some conversations with BMV too and following up on that and just give them a heads up that, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. So if you get a dealer that comes in or a customer saying, you know, this is what I was told to do, they'll know, you know, what's going on. So I think that would be extremely helpful if the BMV can cooperate with us on that. Cool. And with that, any other issues? Anyone, any other topics?
I was just gonna say, you know, the 2.5 years that you've been in the position, as you guys have put your team together, I think it's been helpful for all of us working together, and we've seen a lot of common sense issues brought up. But hearing that you're not real fond of that expression, I'm not really sure what the term would be, but I think we've had some common sense solutions to some problems that we've recovered from, and I think we, you know, pursue that as we go forward with the success of your team. The other thing I mentioned too is, and I know we've talked about this in Marty's part, the Montana titling thing. I know there's not much can be done about that to the best of my knowledge, but I don't know if you're familiar with the Montana titling. You know, we closed that loophole for wholesalers in the state of Indiana, and the door is opened up again through Montana. And I know there's, and if you're not familiar with it, I'd be happy to talk to a lot of people in the industry know about
It's
it.
creation of the LLC.
Yeah.
In Montana.
Yeah. And I guess from the wholesale side to go out and do, you make a personal appearance, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe you do it on Facebook or not Facebook, but
Website.
something online,
Yeah.
but, hopefully we won't find the abuses that we've had before, but I keep getting these, buy cars and suddenly it's like the cars in Indiana, then it went to Montana. And it's back in Indiana. I thought, what, how did that happen?
Yeah.
This seems to be something that's just kind of showing up in the last, what do you think, 6 months, Danny? Has that created a problem for you?
No, I think the thing is about, for example, people that have an older car, like, let's say a guy's got a 67 Cadillac with 35,000 actual miles on the car. And in New York, they give you a bill of sale, not a title, but they give you an odometer statement. And a bill of sale with 35,000 miles on it. Well, B&V here, they're gonna make it automatically miles exempt. I think you go to Montana and get the right miles put on the title, which is the way it should be.
So that's the good side of it, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it should be, and I haven't done that, but that's the way it should. Honestly.
Have you
Already got
had
35,000.
wholesalers show up at the auction though that have Montana dealership or
I
Montana?
haven't seen, I have on the line like you have, Steve, mostly collector car guys use that, I think.
I
Because
get that. The
Yeah,
guys are
you don't
buying
want-
the
because
big dog
if you have-
Ferraris and do the LLCs and title them in Montana.
now is a federal law, is it miles exempt 10 or 20 years now?
I think it's 25 now.
25.
For example.
For miles exempt automatically, are you?
For vehicles manufactured after a certain date. So if it's manufactured before, I want to say 2010, it's still 10 years.
The problem is if you had,
It's been a while since I looked.
even with the death certificate, if you have a car with, say a 98 Corvette with, 13,000 miles on the car. And you have the death certificate with that car and it's in Bob and Mary Smith's name. And the son buys it, they come back, they stamp it miles exempt, it just hurts the value of that car a lot. Even if you have a good paper trail, so it would be nice, if we quit, I don't know how you're gonna be able to do that. But the miles exempt thing is, it hurts value of the car a lot.
We can certainly ask BMV about that practice. I mean, based on my experience there many years ago, there was always question. I mean, when you're talking about vehicles that don't have titles because they're classics or whatever, I mean, it gets a little dicey when you're talking about the odometer statements. I don't know if they do that as a practice, but we can certainly find out. How
I
they
think
handle
most
that.
of the states follow suit what we do, they're
Yeah.
all exempt except for Montana. That I know of, there may be more.
Well, and where we see Montana coming in is, I think, what you're referring to, Fritz, where folks are building, or they're doing their title and reg work as an LLC in Montana to avoid
jump sales
Indiana
tax.
sales tax. I mean, Jared and I were looking this morning, and you can go, there's a website, I believe it's like $1 LLC, $1montana.com or something, and for $1, you can register, you can create an LLC, they'll do all the paperwork for you, you create an LLC, they create the LLC for you, you title and register. So we were doing some digging into the case law here in Indiana, and there's at least one case we found of DOR going back and collecting that sales tax from an Indiana resident. Basically saying it was a fraudulent, not fraudulent, but they were intentionally deceiving the transaction. So
They do, that's exactly.
100%. Yeah, so I don't know how much enforcement, we're actually gonna reach out to DOR and see if they have a position on the issue currently. We're also, I think, maybe gonna look into some data and see how many vehicles, because, in theory, we will have some visibility into it if there's an interim tag issue, right? If the interim tag is issued to an LLC in Montana and not an Indiana resident, then that is an automatic red flag that they are engaging in this sort of scheme, for lack of a better word. So I think we're curious to see, the high-end cars are one, and then RVs are the other big one, because we're talking about high dollar vehicles that, $500,000, 7% of that.
Yeah, but this stuff that I'm seeing, they're just cars. It's just like a guy who wants to be in the wholesale business and
Interesting.
he's getting this information.
I haven't
So
seen,
to 15 Buick Encore.
And are they doing it in their personal name or in a business name?
I tell you the truth, I haven't, but all I'm looking at the Carfax is I haven't seen the titles,
Yeah.
at this stage of the game.
Yeah.
And I have to research that, but I look and, more and more, it happens to be another auction on the east side where somebody's obviously picking something. that
all
against,
the
like,
time, or just once, just all the time, the same dealer, all the time?
I don't know about that. I
I
know
think
there's a
that'd be
lot
like,
of them in
I think
there.
it'd be like a Band-Aid, I don't know if you can consistently do
But it's,
that.
again, I can't, I'm looking at it, why why you got an Indiana title, an Indiana car that suddenly goes to Montana. And then comes back in Indiana, obviously the car doesn't go there, but it's a paperwork issue. I'll show it to you out
Okay,
of
okay.
class here, but
Okay,
That'd be
If I get more information on it, I'll share it with you. I know it was, the problem we had originally was the wholesaler thing.
Yeah,
But, and that wasn't just the wholesalers, that's the fact that the other wholesale warehouses,
right.
which we wanted to avoid, so.
Yeah.
I'll talk about it with you, and then if I find some more information on it. Maybe we can find a common sense resolution.
I'm gonna regret saying that for the next,
You're fine.
next 2 years.
Marty's got his hand up.
I see that.
Peanut gallery. You may check, but you're gonna be talking to DMV about this issue. They have third-party vendors that they've licensed to do this processing.
Mhm.
And one of them, that's their go-to for out-of-state titles because they can turn it around in like a day.
Yeah.
So they do a lot of Montana title processing just as a course of fast title. And they've, been able to get in business with some of the dealers that have had trouble getting banks to send them the titles even after they paid them off.
Yeah.
And these guys say, I got a solution, and they charge them like $250.
Yeah,
So it's not a cheap solution, but it's better than having an unwrapped deal. So you may talk to them about if that's presenting a problem for what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Because I've already expressed that I don't like it, because I'm worried about my dealer getting stuck in something bad later.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones in the middle of the transaction.
right.
So I've already voiced my opinion, but I'm just making you aware that that is a thing.
That could, if it's a provider, it could be that. If they're just doing it as a function of Montana being the fastest turnaround of title, fastest and or cheapest. I don't know what the title fee is in Montana.
Because then they just flip it here, they
Yeah.
get that Montana title, and they send them in to go flip it to an Indiana title.
Yeah.
So it's boom, boom, but, what happened to the original title?
Right.
Is it straight up, or we're gonna come back on this later because we didn't know it was a lien on it in another state, and we got a problem?
Yeah. 100%. Okay.
I'd like to just, unless you have, so I'm kind of curious about asking a question, and this is gonna go back to the fines and penalties. Kind of gone through a lot of the issues, so. Situation where a car gets delivered on Monday, that's the date of sale and delivery, 31-day tag is issued. I don't know, 45-day tag is issued. For some reason, the contract has to be redone, or the names have to be changed on the paperwork, so 2 days later, they come back and do new paperwork.
Yeah.
I don't know, there's some clarity there that I'm not sure how, did they issue a second 31-day tag? Because there's a new date of sale and delivery?
Mhm.
And at that stage of the game, does it trigger the violation process?
Right.
That, again, that may be one of those things that, I'm not sure so if you issue the second 31-day tag, only because it's a paperwork issue.
Right.
It triggers the violation. If you don't issue the second 31-day tag and it's been recontracted, it creates a violation situation.
So
That's where the common sense goes out the window.
No, but I think, and I
don't know how-
probably double check rather than shooting from the hip, but I think the way we handle it is if a deal gets recontracted, you can issue a new 31-day tag, a new 45-day tag. Because the sale date moves to the date it was recontracted, and then all we ask is that the original interim be kept in the deal jacket with all the other paperwork,
Okay, so
and it doesn't count, and that's not a violation.
is it? So it becomes discretionary at some stage of the game. I mean, obviously, I don't know what the procedure is. It records a second tag, so it brings you guys into the case. You're gonna dig into it. Would the complaint be filed or the fine be filed on your part, and then it can be arbitrated?
So typically what'll happen in those
See, I'm trying,
situations,
does it go too far for something that doesn't make?
yeah, so we don't get notified anytime a second interim tag is issued on a single bid. Like, that only comes up after we pull the records from the dealer, which means we're already looking at them for something else. So in your situation, for example, if for whatever reason you recontracted 2 days later, but for whatever, and unrelated, the title was still late and the person filed a complaint, our examiner will go in and ask, the first thing they always do is ask for the deal jacket. And then in the deal jacket, we'll see immediately that there was a recontracting, we can see the original interim plate, and that's not an issue for us. The examiners know that happens, on a regular basis, and they're familiar with being able to look at what they see. So the examiner will, if the title's still late, we could still take enforcement action based on the late title, but that 31-day clock doesn't run it only runs from the recontracting date, not from the original date, sale date, because the deal was recontracted. So they know to look for those things, and that's in our training for them. After the report's done, it then goes to Jared for review, our attorney, and he has a second pair of eyes on it. And then if the enforcement action gets issued and if we're in error, which I would consider that to be an error on our part to find in that situation, we can always clean it up later. You know, the dealer will call us, and if it's something that we see that we realize is an error on our part, we don't need to go through the administrative process for that. We can just issue a modified order removing that
So
fine.
there is something short of administrative process,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah, we can.
examiner looking at it and saying, hey,
If there's a true error on our, now, if we're talking about a situation where you delivered title late. Because CarMax, for example, didn't get you the title on time, that isn't an error on our part. The title
error on your part.
No, the title was late. I mean, there's no debating. The
Yeah.
31 days is a hard deadline. Now, if we're using the wrong date to count from, if we're like, for example, if we're going from the original sale date rather than the recontracting date, and you were off by a day here on the back end, that is an error, and we can fix that on our own. But if it's just recontracting date, 60 days later, they get a title, you're over 31 days, that violates 932.41. So if there is an error, if it's our error, we don't
I
need to
get
do
that,
anything.
yeah.
But, you know,
It's just, again, this is from anybody that doesn't, and a lot of times you're not in the F and I office trying to figure out, do I or do I not issue a second 31-day tag because I had to recontract the deal?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, two things. Number one, you look for a pattern. The guy, you know what I mean? And number two, as long as you got the title within 2 or 3 weeks, who cares? As long as you turn the title in, who cares? I mean, how many chances, I've never heard you ever have a title over 45 days, right? I've covered for you for years, Fritz. No, you turn the title in, we don't have to issue, right?
We just do the very best we can.
You do, really, you awesome.
We utilize
Let's
our-
give Fritz Kreisinger
we
a hand
utilize
for
our
that.
common sense.
50 years in the business. Doing a great job.
Jared, did you have something?
I just wanted to add one caveat, which is you should avoid recontracting as a method of circumventing the title delivery obligation. We did have 2 fines that we issued where someone recontracted about 15 different deals in about a month. Because they come up right on the 31st day, and they did hold the paperwork and allegedly resold the same vehicle to the same person with similar financing. We're still going to treat that as like delivery.
I don't think that's what I was talking about. I've seen what you're,
Yeah, to Danny's point, I mean, there's a pattern.
I like the idea, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, to Danny's point, there's a pattern there. And again,
Yeah,
all of our examiners, when they're looking at it, you know, what stands out, what's different about like 15 at once is crazy in a month.
It just happens.
100%.
It just happens.
We switch gears. Can we switch gears, man? You okay?
I'm all good.
Okay. This is not a leading question. This is just my own memory. And Marty, when I was president of the dealer association, Marty knows every dealer that becomes a president has a hot button, and my hot button is the Sunday Indiana Blue Law, as we call it. And we, as new car dealers, we fight very hard to keep that law in existence. But now as spring comes, it seems like we have a lot of independent used car dealers now we see them popping up. So and back then, and Marty, that's been many years ago, that when I was president, but back then, I think the process, if we saw somebody open, we were to call the state police. Remind me, what is the process? Because as dealers, we kind of police ourselves,
Yeah.
with that, but.
I mean, personally, I haven't had any conversations with ISP about, them enforcing those things. I don't think that's a bad idea. I would also just advise you guys to let us know, shoot me an email or Jared or Sean. So that we're aware of it, and then we can certainly, if you want to snap a couple pictures with your phone, all the better. So we'll have some actual evidence, because the likelihood of us getting an examiner out there on a Sunday on short notice it's not gonna happen. So if you guys, if you're driving past and you snap some photos, or even just, letting us know it's happening. Because if they're doing it once, it's probably happening again, right?
Well, fortunately, I don't, to my knowledge, I don't have anything going on now, but it's, you know, when you're out driving with your family and you just happen to see a guy with his door open on a Sunday.
Yeah.
You just kind of wonder, and typically it's independent use car.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the few times I've had folks approach me with wanting to discuss this issue and the potential of eliminating those blue laws. You know, they have been the independent guys and they're like, well, you know, we just want to hustle, we want to sell. And I was like, look, that's a you guys, like, you guys gotta sort this out amongst yourselves. And I just kind of moonwalk away from the conversation. Because, you know, from our perspective, we're just enforcing what's out there. If someone's selling on Sunday, you know, I think in our bill, we're actually moving the Sunday sales prohibition from OAG over to us. And so I mean, not that we can't take enforcement action now, but we certainly will in the future. If we have enough to substantiate, you know, revoking the license or suspending or fining, whatever the case may be, when it comes to Sunday sales, because to our point earlier, it's a very black and white violation. You're not supposed to be doing that, and it's a competitive advantage to be able to do it. And we're part of what we do here is keep an even playing field for everyone. So, if you see it out there, absolutely let us know. If you want to notify law enforcement, by all means. I can't guarantee they're going to make Sunday's vehicle sales a, you know, priority, depending on who you're calling and you know what post it is or things like that. But certainly something we're interested in and stamping out, and something that we could probably act pretty quickly on if we get, you know, information that it's occurring.
Marty, is that coming up at all in your?
It hasn't been in a while.
Good.
It kind of, you know, it's like a lot of things. We had a complaint investigated one time. This has been several years ago. And the poor guy was kicked out of his house and was staying in the dealership, and that's why the door was open on Sunday, because he was living there and he was just going in and out because he got kicked out of the house. You know, so we figured that one out. We don't tell people to refer to the state police anymore, because when we did used to do that, they kind of told us, they said, you know, we don't really, that's not our cup of tea, and we don't really know how to enforce that, you know, because different, I'll tell you a stupid story just because that's how I am. Back in the day, and God rest his soul, Bob Borman was an independent dealer who had a satellite branch with no license. And we couldn't get him to get licensed. And I was a deputy commissioner of BMV at the time. So my job, we regulated them. So I called up and said, man, you gotta get a license, you gotta get a license. Well, he let me have it, and he unloaded it, told me how much money he'd give to get it and all that stuff. And I was just like, whoa, I said, I'm sorry, this is my job, you know. So then we had field investigators that would go out and put chains on the door and lock it up. That was the old school days, and we didn't have cell phones and stuff, but we had pagers. So I sent somebody out and they chained his door up, and man, he really got happy. He got the license, but fast forward 20 years, you know, I've been in this job since 2006, and he wins my Time Dealer of the Year award. And I got to meet him out in Las Vegas for the award, and I've got to be with me for the presentation. And I'm praying he doesn't remember me. And we went walking up and got our stuff. He never said a word, and I didn't either. So I think he probably just never put the two together. But it was one of those things where, you know, when you run into a big dog like that, sometimes they push back pretty hard, and we used to push back pretty hard too, so we just sent somebody out to chain it up.
Yeah.
So, you know, that might be the solution for your investigators, is to go out and put a lock on it if they're not complying, and then you'll get their attention, I think.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is we have to invest in some chains. I don't think we have any in the office anymore.
Yes, and Mr. Morgan treated me fine, and I don't think anybody to say I said anything bad about it.
Well, I hope I never have to play it. I just didn't know
See it,
that there's just, you know, it's springtime.
Yeah, yeah, it's that time of year.
The big store, not the, it's just a little shop.
Anything else? Well, as always, thank you gentlemen for coming out. Hopefully it doesn't get too bad on your drive home.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, the Sunday sales? Yeah. I was getting a lot.
Have you? I got yours. Yeah, just now that I'm in the same role. Hey, we're kind of-